So, hier's dit nou by To Catch a Killer, Janine Lazarus. Ons gaan hierdie boek gesels, maar we don't want to give away everything. Good morning, Janine.
Morning.
I wanted to motivate people to buy this book because it's gripping stuff.
I'm glad.
The Queen of Sleaze on Our Couch. And it sounds like an insult, but it's not. But before we get to the story, I just want to get to know you. You know, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Johannesburg in a suburb called Linden.
Okay, Linden.
Yeah, as an only child. And I actually wanted to be a criminal lawyer. Okay. And I failed dismally first year BA. And I decided that the next best bet was to become a crime reporter.
And what school did you attend?
At King David Victory Park.
Can you believe it? That was before all the Afrikaans people took over Linden.
Yeah, that's right.
It's now like Durbanville.
It was the Afrikaans Houghton.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and it's where all the Afrikaans member of Parliament stayed.
Okay. And in studies?
That's what I'm saying. I barely scraped through matric.
Okay.
My parents were very adamant about me becoming a lawyer, but I was too busy looking for a husband at university, so I failed first year. I didn't come away with a law degree or a husband.
That's actually fantastic. And then, was it curiosity as a child or into stories? You know, the journalism part.
I've always been fascinated. I mean, you'll find on my playlist on my PVR, I always watch cop series, so FBI, CSI, etc. And I've always been very, very, very caught up in the dark, in those kinds, in the criminal mind. In fact, at one point in my book, I write about wanting to become a criminologist.
Now, as a journalist, you crossed a very dangerous line when you became the story.
I did.
But you never kept your distance. So what I would like to find out is, why did you do this?
Because, you know, who can say that they've ever interviewed a serial killer? Because Jacobus Petrus Geldenhuys, who was dubbed the Norwood serial killer, was raping and killing within a 2.5-kilometer radius of my block of flats because I looked like two of his victims. They were all sort of medium build, my same height, long dark hair. I had long dark hair at that point. And because I was dedicated, cutthroat news reporter, crime reporter, and this was going to be my story and nobody was going to take it away from me.
Wow.
Well, how old were you at that stage?
In my late 20s.
Late 20s.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's still exciting and everything. And I saw they called him Happy in Slikkie.
Yes, because
so after a murder, and it's I mean they will show pictures of him. You know, he'll take a slikkie of the milk or whatever and just one bite out of the bologna.
Exactly.
So weird.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what he would do. And he left his DNA all over the place and police could never find him. Because like the Russian serial killer, Andrei Chikatilo, he had this weird physical anomaly where he carried 2 blood types. So the police could never track him down.
That's just fascinating. And I saw, I mean, his blood was A positive, but his semen was O positive.
Yes.
But it happens to 1 in a million
It does.
men.
It does.
And it's actually kind of a given if you've got it and you know it. I don't know if I probably didn't know it, but you can get away with murder.
Well, that was the proverbial needle in the haystack and why the police couldn't find him.
Yeah.
And the same happened with Andrei Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov in Russia. The police looked for him for 20 years. He was found guilty of 58 murders.
Wow.
And it was fascinating how they assassinated him. I thought they'd do hanging in Russia, but they put you in a soundproof booth and shoot you.
Yep, like that's it. 1 bullet.
1 bullet. Yeah. So now, just why did you became obsessed with? Because of the story, but were you fascinated by Kobus, or just because it was in your area, in Norwood? Both. So it was a combination.
Yeah, both. I mean, you know, the story has always been in my blood, and I was a die-hard news reporter. I had blood in my ink stream, and I wanted this story, and I wanted to scoop the opposition, and I did.
And what was it like covering a crime story during a South African transition?
That's an interesting question, very interesting, because you must remember that South Africa we were becoming a democracy.
Exactly.
We'd gone through the referendum, there was the Bishu massacre. I worked with a famous Bang Bang Club, the photographers, João Silva.
Yes, they were friends.
Yeah, Kevin Carter, Ken Oosterbrook, who got shot dead in Tokoza, the Star's chief photographer. and politics was leading the news. F.W. de Klerk and Madiba had just been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So coming with a crime story and fighting for a front page lead in the midst of politics, which was leading the news, was quite a feat.
And that famous picture of you, where it's like bait. Did you do it a couple of nights? Was it one night? And were the police watching you? Just take us through that, how to do that. Because, I mean, you must be, I nearly said shit scared, but really scared.
Well, the police, I was a crime reporter, so I had to work very closely with Bricks and Murder and Robbery Squad. And they knew that I lived at the corner of Grant Avenue and Iris Road, and that really was his kill spot. So they asked if they could use my flat as a surveillance point. They came in, they camped in my flat for a few weeks. They put their guns, their pump-action shotguns, all over my cane lounge suite. My cat slept under the bed. And one night, they told me to walk down Iris Road. The Nord killer was a policeman living in the barracks of the Nord police station. They knew that because of the cartridges that were found at the crime scene. They came from police issue 9mm. And one dark night, they made me walk down Iris Road, past the Nord police station and the Nord police barracks in an effort to lure him out. Well, I failed because here I'm sitting. He didn't come out and attack me. And part of me wanted him to come out because I knew then I'd get an exclusive story.
It's amazing.
Well, I just want, to stand still for a moment and once again refer to the pictures that we see on the screen as well. Just take us through what went through your mind, some of the emotions that you've experienced. I mean, you were an experienced crime reporter and journalist at that time, but were you scared?
I was adrenalized. Of course I was scared. I mean, the man held my suburb hostage for 18 months. I would sleep with a baseball bat next to my bed. I don't know if I thought I was going to play baseball with him. I would take a circuitous route to come home. I wouldn't shop I wouldn't pop over the road, to the local cafe or go across the road for a glass of wine. So, yeah, absolutely I was nervous. And Norwood itself, all the single girls, it was a very hip and trendy place. Everybody vacated. I mean, if you drive to Norwood now, you will see burglar bars that were never there before on first floor flats. A razor wire snaking its way across down walls. Women moved in with their boyfriends or with their parents, and they'd come back in the morning just to water their plants or feed their cats. So of course I felt fear, but ultimately I wanted the story. So the adrenaline took over the fear, and I knew that I was sitting on the biggest crime story of my life.
While on that night, you didn't find the husband. No,
I didn't find the husband or the killer. No.
No. So, serious question. So, I mean, knowing that he's from the barracks or maybe from the police, but it's the police watching you.
Yes.
That must be scary because, I mean, just 1% of a thought of realizing it is a policeman. They're looking for a policeman. And
he could have been one of the cops in my flat.
Exactly.
He could have been one of the cops in my flat.
And what
was really interesting is Sergeant John Miles was head of the Norwood CID. And he got, first of all, a police identikit was issued that looked nothing like the Norwood killer. The Norwood killer's dark eyes, dark hair. They issued a police identikit of a man with spiked blonde hair and quite pockmarked skin. Somebody drew up an identikit and issued it. And Captain John Miles got wind of the fact, a tip-off, that a man fitting that ID kit description was at the Houghton golf course. So he left, roared off out of the police station with his lights, flashing, and he saw a man fitting that. He saw a policeman, a uniformed policeman. He picked him up to go and pick up this guy at the Houghton golf course, and the man he picked up was actually the Norwood killer.
No way.
Yep.
It went with him.
Yep.
But it's actually very clever because that's the last place they will look for a serial killer.
Wow.
It's just like being a policeman. And again, going back to Kobus, started just as rape and then just got worse. But as a child, he heard animals, so just like the way you saw him, did you ever think he was just vulnerable or it's his circumstances and you feel pity more than anger?
you know what, I've covered the most violent crime. And I've covered crime that was worse than just serial killing. But there's always, and that's what my book is about, it's trying to find the light.
Yes.
I always feel that even in the depths of the deepest kind of evil, there's a sliver of light. And I was smuggled downstairs 5 times after he was sentenced to death. I was smuggled downstairs to what was the holding cells at the Iran Supreme Court, and by a plainclothes detective. And he saw me in his kind of cement block cell, and he called me by name. He said, "Hello, Janine." And he was crying and he was weeping, and he seemed truly remorseful. So did I feel remorse for him? He grew up as a single child.
Mother was very weird.
Yeah, very
Controlling.
authoritarian, dictatorial mother, very religious zealot, an absent father. He was sick in standard 3, chickenpox, meningitis, spent a year in a hospital, and then did what most serial killers do. He abused animals, he set fire to his parents' garage. I didn't find out if he wet his bed, but that triumvirate is very much part and parcel of a serial killer.
And you mentioned wetting the bed, but it's also, if you look at international profiles of serial killers, it's kind of a recipe in terms of your DNA and the way you think.
Yes.
And I know there was this research in America that said if you basically just put people on medication instead of death row, because they all share, I think like all the serial killers that's in jail for life, they share the same kind of DNA or gene, and it's a scary thought.
They do.
Not to come, to say, hey, you can dit blameer op dit nie, but it is a
They
thing to
do,
think
but
about
what
it.
they also share is they're very manipulative. And I mean, for me, Kobus Geldenhuys is he's a simpleton. I interviewed him 27 years after he was sentenced.
Yes, I want to get to that after the 7 o'clock
I
news.
interviewed him. He doesn't speak properly. He has his conversation doesn't flow. But the one thing about a serial killer is that they're extremely manipulative, and they show that they're remorseful, but in fact they feel absolutely no remorse at all.
That is so weird. Janine, ons gaan nou daar by uitkom, so jy kan ingeskakel bly, want hierdie onderhoude in COVID tyd met hierdie selfe Kobus, ek's baie nuuskierig daaroor. Ek sal sê hoe hy nou lyk, maar ons het nog 'n hele paar vrae, maar maak so lank seker, bestel sommer in die advertensiebreek by To Catch a Killer. Welkom terug hier by die groot ontbyt. As jy net ingeskakel het, hierdie boek is, die kinders gaan bang word, so ons het vergeet om te sê, wees maar net versigtig, dit gaan oor 'n serial killer. By To Catch a Killer, dit is Kobus Geldenhuys, die Norwood serial killer. Dit was 'n fascinerende storie. And you won't believe this, Janine. One of our viewers, and it's in the book, I saw when he started his career, at one stage he was in the airport, just as security, and it was Tinus Velddag, and it says, ek het saam met Kobus, voormalige Jan Smits lughawe gewerk in 1989 and 90, and we never knew that he could be a serial killer. What a small world, working with him. So for me, let's get to seeing him again. I mean, that picture he was young, with that smile and that eyes, looks like a normal guy, a bit creepy. But seeing him, how did he age? How did you experience it after all these years?
I decided, I was approached by Clive Morris Productions.
Yes.
There's a movie or a television series is currently in pre-production and development, and we're hoping it's going to happen.
Okay.
I was approached by Clive Morris Productions as a possibility of this movie happening. So I decided the next best step was to actually go and see him. And it was just after the restrictions had been lifted on lockdown. Kobus hadn't seen anybody for months and months. I'd made no application through correctional services. I simply rocked up at Boksburg Correctional Services at the prison. I was the second group of visitors to go in post-lockdown. It was the most horrible procedure to sit in the visitors' room and be given a ticket and then be frisked and go through security. I sat behind a double-glazed window in the visitors' room on these fixed metal stools. I waited for what seemed like hours, and finally I saw this stooped individual who'd gone completely grey, the only white man who came out in an orange uniform, and his eyes locked with mine. And he came forward and he sat down and he said, "Hello, Janine."
How old is he now?
He's 6 months younger than me, so I'm 58, he's 57.
Can you believe it? But did it trigger feelings? Because I mean,
I cried after I'd seen him for the weekend. I went to bed. It brought up the most horrible emotions. He was a cardboard cutout of a man. He was a wound-up toy. He was just saying things, and I don't know what I expected to see, but I didn't expect to see that. He was emotionless. He was a vacuum.
Sure.
But let's get to the kind of emotional impact and post-traumatic stress that you went through as a result of covering so much violence. Because like I've told you behind the scenes, you're such a remarkable woman, but it does have an impact, doesn't it?
You're very kind. It does. We like to think of ourselves that we've got rhino hides, but I also covered Gert van Rooyen and Joey Hardhoff, the missing girls that have never been found. I've seen terrible violence. So you internalize it, but eventually you start coming unstuck. And throughout my reporting career, I saw a clinical psychologist who would help. I in fact, refer to him as in my acknowledgements. I thank him for putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. It has an enormous impact. I mean, it impacts your dreams. It colors your relationships. You don't have great relationships because what you're looking for is the darkness inside of everybody. And you'd be, if you weren't a human being, you wouldn't be affected by it. And I'm a deep, deep empath. You know, I've always stayed close to the surviving victims of violence, to their families. So this had an enormous impact on me.
And there's the funniest story 2-3 weeks ago that Joey Hardhoff's son's been jailed.
I saw that.
That's how funny
in New
was
Zealand.
That? In New Zealand for child
But
molestation.
Gert van Rooyen's son was also when I covered that story, Gert van Rooyen's son was also jailed for I think it was sexual assault. That seems to run in that family.
So now, at the end of the book, you mentioned some of South Africa's worst serial killers, and it's we're not going to scare people, but it's 20 counts of murder and 10 people here and 19 and 16 people killed, and it's fascinating the names they've got through the media, and it's never going to stop worldwide. I mean, America's got I think they're number one in terms of psychopaths walking around, but there's the guy in Russia, and after covering it, it's like, do you look at people differently? You know, looking for signs, because you study these people. Is it something that's always with you, or are you really free and you feel it's fine, but maybe sometimes just in a grocery store, standing next to someone, you feel, because they're out there?
No, I mean, they say, you know, in the research, and I did extensive research for this book, that 1 in every 10 people could be a serial killer. I don't think that, but I mean... serial killers, you know, we imagine them to be this behemoth in our dreams with fangs and horns, and they're not like that. They could be the guy sitting next to you in church, you know, as you said, the guy standing at the broccoli counter in a supermarket. They could be anybody. They don't look like that.
And it's again proof with the Klaver story, with that little kid that was just, but we're not going into detail. But yeah, it's a normal next door neighbor, and it's someone capable of doing something.
Well, look at Joey Hardhoff's son. He doesn't look like somebody who would abuse a child.
Yeah. So this book is really well written, and you said you always wanted to do a handwritten book, you know, really write a book. So everyone's waiting for another one, and I know we're promoting this one, but is there any plans to? Is that something totally different, or focusing on the rest of these guys? That's at the end of the book.
I was thinking of doing another one on Gert van Rooyen, but there's quite a lot of books that have been written about him.
Yes. What a mystery.
So yeah, I thought about that. I mean, I'm an ex-crime reporter, and I've got lots of crime reporting tales to talk about. But frankly, writing a book I've never given birth to a child, but I'd put it to you that this was blood, sweat and tears. It takes a long time. This book took me over 2 years. I run a media consultancy, and you're not earning when you're writing. So, you know, you've got to find time. And it's really writing a book is the most, I've covered terrible crime. I've put myself in the line of violence. I've got shot at. I've seen people die. This is without doubt the hardest thing I've ever done. So I'd like to write another book, but I need the time.
And what would you like people to take from this specific book when or after reading it, in essence?
I'd like them to understand that life isn't linear, that everybody is capable of monstrosity. I don't know if you've ever felt road rage. And I wonder what makes us cross the line. You know, I think we're all capable of committing acts of violence. That's one. Two, I want them to know what it was like being a reporter before digital. It was shoe leather.
Yeah.
There was no Wi-Fi. You had to get up and actually look at people in the eye. I want them to understand the South Africa that I covered as a journalist pre-1992. It was a fantastic time to be a journalist. And I want them to understand the ethics that were in question then. The fact that the police put me in the line of fire, the fact that my editor thought nothing of agreeing to me being used as a decoy by the police, and the ethical question of me getting involved in a story. So it is, and I want people to think.
It is a good book. We've got 30 seconds. You after visiting him, you were in a outside. There was a warden, and he said to you, he's just manipulating you. You, Kobus, he'll never get out. First, do you think he'll ever get out? And what will you tell his mother?
I saw his mother.
Yeah.
His mother thinks he is pure as the driven snow. No, he'll never get out.
So
he's trying very hard.
with
He's applied
parole
for
then.
parole 4 times.
Yeah.
It will get denied. He'll spend the rest of his life behind bars.
So luckily that is in place. And the rest of these guys at the back of this book, because some of them makes Kobus look like a kindergarten
You're right.
teacher. It's scary what's out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Janine
much.
Lazarus, it's available everywhere.
It is.
So people must buy it. And we're going to force you in a very bad way to write another one. No, I'm joking.
Thank
We'll
you
just
so
wait.
much.
Thank you for your time.